I just wanted to talk about how media adaptations of classic literature are really shit right now. I think a lot of people realize that with the new Wuthering Heights that just came out. Obviously, some not as bad. Debatably, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. You know, most people have mixed reviews about that. But Wuthering Heights, obviously, if you are online constantly, you see people debating and talking about the Wuthering Heights movie that just came out. And I just wanted to give my 1 2 cents as a person who does enjoy classic literature. We're talking about mainly the Western canon, of course, because that's the most popular and that's what Wuthering Heights is in. That's the section that it's in. So I'm just gonna, this is my first time doing a full-on video, talking with you. If you scroll through my YouTube, I'm gonna be from my iPad. So hopefully I get better and I could actually talk off the top of my head. But I put all my thoughts in this little Google Doc. So bear with me and just listen to my little talky rant for maybe a minute or two. Thank you. Why modern classic adaptations fall flat? That's my little intro. These modern classics fail as good adaptations as these movies, either by the producer or the screenwriter. I say that because I am not a person who's behind the movie sets. I would usually say, I would say that it's probably the screenwriter, the script writer, sorry, and the producer. Either they, it depends on the movie, I guess. Either they collab or they, or usually the screenwriter who is, writing the script, screenwriter, obviously in the name. They deliberately separate the political, social, economic status of these characters portrayed in, obviously we're talking about Wuthering Heights, so I say the Brontë sisters' works. So I say the Brontë sisters because a lot of the books have a lot of adaptations, and there's contention in a lot of their movie adaptations, not just Wuthering Heights exclusively. So I just wanted to put that there. Because they are intertwined with the romance aspect of each of their stories. If you separate the two, so the two meaning the romance and the political, socio-economical world that is going on in their stories, if you separate the two, then there is a lack of depth in either part of the narrative. The time period in which the Brontë sisters and also the characters in which these stories are integral to the stories being written is enhanced when choosing to produce a classic adaptation of these writers' works. Both portray the hardships of the time period in which these characters lived, that cannot be replicated in modern adaptations. Let me pause there. I say both portray, both meaning the romantic and the political and socio-economical, race or class, gender aspect of these stories are important to both the authors and the characters. So yeah. And I was saying that you could do a modern adaptation and really it's easier to separate these two, but it still leaves that hole when you watch the movie, because these political aspects are so integral to the story. So obviously the most notable one, modern adaptation, is 10 Things I Hate About You, the Shakespeare adaptation. Um, it's a teen rom-com drama. I never watched it. I know a lot of, like, everyone and their mom loves that movie. I'm just not a teen romance movie person. Even when I was a teen, I never really cared for teen romance movies, so I just never had the urge to watch it. Um, but that has the story narrative and its modern setting being what was it, late 90s, early 2000s, to give some separation to the political and socio um, and part of the story. To it just gives a better separation. It gives them a more natural separation uh, that you don't really see in a lot of classic literature adaptations that are trying to be period pieces, or at least, in if they're not period pieces, like historical period pieces, they're not, like, if they're fantasy, fantasy still has its base in the real world. Like, you could feel it, obviously, especially with a lot of Western fantasy. It still has a class system. It still has misogyny in it, for good and bad. Sometimes, whether the author or the TV show producer or writer um, can make misogyny integral to the story. But ooh, I'm ranting. um but I was just saying that these modern adaptations of these classic literatures um they have more leeway, is what I'm trying to say. So when I'm talking about mostly the period or fantasy settings more than modern adaptations. Blah blah blah. If we are talking about adapting classics and keeping the time period on which the story is held, the adaptator should understand that keeping the political, social, and economic themes of the author's book is integral to the character's motivations. In this instance, their romantic endeavors. So, like with Wuthering Heights and more classics that are more romance based, you go for the romantic relationship of these two, or I don't know, polyamorous characters, three, like if it's a love triangle or whatever, their romantic story. So, what I'm saying is that you are separating, like, how Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights is supposed to be portrayed as either Romani, black, mixed, or other. That is a racial component. That is poignant to his character going throughout the story, his desire to want to be a better, like, to want to seem better than these other people who are othering him, because of the racial component that is within his heart, that he is carrying as someone who is seen as, not within social and racial class. Continuing, as is real life and modern day, that does not diminish just because the book is an older, dramatic, gothic fiction novel. And like I said before, if you're not doing a modern retelling, it kind of this the story loses its punch. Even in a modern retelling, there's still, I mean, we obviously, I'm making this video in 2026. There's still class divide. There's still racial, sex, gender, divides in whatever country you go to in the world. So taking away that component, it leaves much to be desired in the story. Da, da, da. The intersection between sexuality, gender, class, race, etc., as I said before, provides depth, relevance, and relatability to the social commentary the author is trying to portray. I know it's crazy because, you know, they're women, but the Bronte sisters were trying to say something in their stories. It wasn't, you know, in the situation with Wuthering Heights, you know, a lot of people are just like, yeah, this is the greatest love story ever told, as with, you know, the adaptation that just came out. You know, reading the story, I think if you have certain, I'm gonna use a buzzword, critical thinking skills, it is very apparent that the who was it? Charlotte Bronte was trying to make some say in her work. I think that's just what a good writer does, and I think she was a very good writer. And it's just very apparent that's what she was trying to do while trying to create a tragic, doomed love story that is intertwined with so many other important aspects of the, you know, what was going on in her world at that time, in her time period. Provides depth, relevancy, and relatability to the social commentary that universally makes books like Wuthering Heights considered to be classic literature, and beloved past its publishing date. It's the reason why we love these stories. There's a universality to them, as well as the particular being the certain uniqueness of the story and the characters and the world building and the character development, but there's still a universality in their struggles, as you could see in the character. If you read the book, I in this rant I didn't mention, but I did not read Wuthering Heights, but it's very apparent from what I have read from other people. I know this might discredit me, and obviously people will just be like, oh, you didn't read the book, so, but it's very apparent from what I saw. I did do my research about the book, and you could just look at, you don't have to again critically think to just even read the synopsis and be like, hey, this is not a romantic relationship that is to be idolized, and the characters are to be looked upon not just as sexual objects, but from the context in which they live, as Kamala Harris said, in the context of which, you know, all that came before and after and whatever the hell else she said. Something about falling from the damn coconut tree, whatever. That universality that makes books like Wuthering Heights considered to be classic literature and beloved past its publishing date. I just said that. Ignoring this aspect while adapting the soul romance of many of these stories lose the nuance of character development and compelling story narratives. That's all I wrote at the time. I bet I'm gonna write a bunch of more stuff later, but as you can see, I'm kind of reiterating the same thing in every sentence, and that's because that's the thesis, and it's really comes down to a few sentences that I just, elongated because I'm so used to that, because I just have been writing essays a lot. I'm so used to elongating every freaking sentence. I don't know why I said freaking. I think I'm a grown-ass person, I could curse, but what needs to be done is understand. I know a lot of people love their fantasy and their time period romances to be escapism, but time and place, there are certain books that really just cannot be separated from their political aspects, and that makes it better. And I don't think people understand why certain pieces of media are upheld as the best of the best. Why they, even if they read it or see it, be it movies or books, they see it and they think it's poignant to them. They don't really understand in their heart why they like this thing. And I think that's why we are also in this conundrum. People are not analyzing their feelings for media that they like and dislike, and saying, hey, I like this thing because it A, B, C, and D, la 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 la, or I dislike this thing because of this aspect. They just want it to be a big conglomerate of black and white and no introspection. And to this, I'm trying to say that what makes Wuthering Heights good is the political, social, race, sexual, liberation that comes through, this tension in Heathcliff being an other, and what's the main girl's name? Kathy, being a white, wealthy person. There's a dynamic there. There is a dynamic, and it brings a messiness to the story, but that messiness needs to be there with the romance. It cannot be diluted for a I wouldn't even call it romance, but a softcore porn fantasy. What are you getting off to? I guess I like my stuff different, but like, what are you getting off to when there is no tension? That's what I at least personally think when I see these adaptations. I'm questioning their worth when there is nothing underneath. It's just, you look under the box and it's air. It was all an illusion, so I was just thinking, actually I don't know what I'm thinking now, I'm just rambling. But that's my thoughts. I hope they weren't too messy. This is my first talky video. Hopefully I could make it sound better, because I know I'm really awkward and I know I probably didn't make that much sense. But thank you for listening, and if you agree or disagree, please talk about it in my comments, because I would, that's totally fine by me. Yeah, thanks very much for watching. Bye.